He taught me to shoot straight Marshall Whitmore. Finished reloading and walked over to where Ashford was in the dirt, clutching his shattered wrist. Cornelius. Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy, theft, fraud, and attempted murder. You have the right to go to hell. Ashford spat through gritted teeth. You think you when I got judges and politicians from here to Austin in my pocket? I'll be out of jail before Christmas, and when I am, I'll hunt down every last one of you. Cyrus limped over, favoring his left knee that had taken a hard knock when he dove for cover. Cornelius, you always were too smart for your own good, but you made one mistake. You thought everybody was as crooked as you. The marshal pulled out a pair of iron shackles and began securing the wounded man. Actually, Mr. Ashford, you might want to reconsider those threats. See, while you were busy trying to frame Mississippi Lane in silence, witnesses, my colleagues, were raiding your warehouse in San Antonio. They found enough stolen merchandise to fill a freight train, along with detailed records of every transaction you made over the past 2 years. Ashford's face went ashen. That's impossible. Those records were locked in my private safe. Were locked. The marshal corrected. Turns out your business partner Miguel Torres kept copies of everything as insurance. When we arrested him, he was more than happy to trade information for a reduced sentence. Sheriff Hollister struggled to his feet, his badge hanging askew in his clothes, covered in dust. Marshal, I want you to know I never meant for things to go this far. Cornelius told me the girl was guilty, showed me witnesses. You never bothered to interview Cyrus. Interrupted. Wade, you've been wearing that badge for 10 years, and in all that time you never learned the difference between taking a man's word and seeking the truth from the house. Maggie appeared on the porch, still carrying the Winchester, but with the barrel pointed safely at the ground. Her green eyes swept over the scene, the wounded and captured criminals, the federal marshal taking charge, and the old rancher who had risked everything to defend her. But the danger wasn't over yet. In the distance, another dust cloud was approaching, and this time it carried something that would change everything they thought they knew about the case. The approaching dust cloud resolved into a single rider pushing his horse hard across the valley floor. As the figure drew closer, Cyrus recognized Dr. Benjamin Harper, the town physician, his medical bag bouncing against his saddle as he rode. Marshall Whitmore, Dr. Harper called out as he reined in his lather horse. Thank God I found you in time. There's something you need to know about this case, something that changes everything. The marshal looked up from securing Cornelius Ashford's shackles. What is it, Doc? Dr. Harper dismounted quickly, his weathered face grim with purpose. I've been treating Mrs. Ashford for her nerves these past few months, and yesterday she came to me in a terrible state. Said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. She wrote this confession and begged me to make sure the right people saw it. Ashford's face went white as fresh snow. Eleanor doesn't know what she's saying. She's been taking laudanum for her condition. Your wife is clear-headed as a mountain stream. Dr. Harper interrupted, and what she told me would make a saint weep with rage. He handed the paper to Marshal Whitmore. She witnessed the whole thing, saw you plant that jewelry in Miss Lane's room after you fired her for refusing your advances. Maggie gasped, her hand flying to her throat. He tried to force himself on me when I fought him off and threatened to tell his wife. He flew into a rage and accused me of theft. The next day, Marshal Whitmore read the confession aloud, his voice growing harder with each word. Eleanor Ashford states that on the morning of October 15th, she watched her husband placed jewelry stolen from his own criminal enterprise into Miss Lane's personal belongings, and summoned Sheriff Hollister with false accusations of theft. Cyrus felt a cold fury building in his chest. You piece of filth, you tried to destroy an innocent girl because she wouldn't submit to your disgusting desires. It gets worse. Dr. Harper Continued Mrs. Ashford also revealed the location of Cornelius's real safe hidden behind a false wall in their cellar. Contains account books going back 5 years detailing theft from Dallas to El Paso. Sheriff Hollister sat down heavily on Cyrus's porch steps, his head in his hands. My God, what have I done? I nearly sent an innocent woman into exile based on the word of a monster marshal. Whitmore folded the confession and tucked it into his coat. Wade, you're going to have to answer for your part in this, but the fact that you finally stood up to Ashford when it mattered might count for something with the judge. As the sun began to set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the cleanup began. Cornelius Ashford and the surviving members of his gang were loaded into a prison wagon that had arrived with 2 deputy marshals. The wounded were treated, the dead were wrapped for burial, and statements were taken from all the witnesses. Maggie stood beside Cyrus on his porch watching as the wagon disappeared down the dusty trail toward town. Mr. Blackwood, I don't know how to thank you if you hadn't taken me and hadn't believed in me. No thanks necessary, young lady. I just did what any decent person should do. Cyrus smiled and patted her shoulder gently. Besides, my house could use a woman's touch if you're willing to stay on as my housekeeper. Diego's wife Maria could use the help, and I could use someone who knows the difference between right and wrong. 6 months later, Maggie married Diego's eldest son, Carlos, in a ceremony held right there on the ranch. Sheriff Wade Hollister served 30 days in jail and was stripped of his badge, but was allowed to work as a deputy under a new honest sheriff. Cornelius Ashford was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, and his stolen fortune was returned to its rightful owners. And Cyrus Blackwood lived to see justice truly served, knowing that sometimes the most important stand a person can take is the one they take for someone who can't stand up for themselves. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful you won't forget it any time soon. Click on the video now. The words hung heavy in the air, but what came next changed everything. I just had a very enlightening conversation with a fence down in San Antonio, Marshal Whitmore said, his tone calm, deadly calm. Man by the name of Miguel Torres. He's been singing like a bird. Says a certain wealthy merchant from Millbrook has been moving stolen jewelry through his operation for months now. The effect was immediate. Sheriff Hollister's face turned so pale Cyrus thought the man might faint. The Garrett brothers shifted nervously, suddenly very interested in the tips of their boots. But the marshal wasn't finished. He took a slow step forward, each word sharper than the last. Seems to me like you boys might want to reconsider who the real thief is here. Because if I find out any of you help cover this up, or worse, try to frame an innocent woman, well, he didn't have to finish. The threat hung there like smoke after a gunshot. Cyrus narrowed his eyes. At 67, he'd learned the hard way not to trust a man just because he wore a badge. He'd seen lawmen lie, seen them bought and paid for like cattle. And yet, something in Whitmore's gaze, and the way he stood firm in the face of danger, felt different. Cyrus nodded slowly. She's inside, he said, voice firm. Accused, but never proven guilty. If you want to question her, Marshal, she's under my roof, and she's welcome there. Sheriff Hollister took a desperate step forward. Now, wait, just, shut your mouth, Wade. Whitmore snapped, his voice a whip crack. You've said plenty. He turned back to Cyrus with a small nod. Appreciate the courtesy, Mr. Blackwood. But first, I believe I need to have a private conversation with these gentlemen. Ezra and Caleb Garrett had already started backing toward their horses, but Whitmore's voice froze them mid-step. Nobody leaves. He motioned toward their saddlebags. You've been riding hard. Your horses are lathered, and those saddlebags look real full. Mind if I take a look? Ezra's face flushed with anger. You got no right. I've got every right when I'm investigating federal crimes, Whitmore said, his hand casually resting on his gun. We can do this easy or we can do this hard. Up to you. Sheriff Hollister's eyes darted around like a cornered animal. Marshal, There's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Whitmore said coldly, is how a man like you got elected in the first place. Without waiting, he walked over to Ezra Garrett's horse, flipped open a saddlebag, and reached inside. His hand came out holding a small velvet pouch that jingled softly. The light hit it just right, and even from where Cyrus stood, he saw the unmistakable glint of emeralds and diamonds. Well, the marshal murmured. Looks like we found Mrs. Ashford's missing jewelry. He held the pouch higher, letting the crowd see it glimmer. Funny thing, though, this set was reported stolen from a jewelry store in Austin 3 months ago. Same time as several other pieces that V been turning up across Texas. Sheriff Hollister's knees buckled, and he sank into the dirt. I didn't know, he whispered, trembling. Cornelius told me she stole it from his wife. I didn't know. Ignorance ain't a defense when you're wearing a badge, Whitmore growled. Caleb Garrett suddenly lunged, breaking free and diving toward Hollister's dropped revolver. The first gunshot cracked through the silence like a hammer to glass. Caleb's bullet missed Whitmore's head by inches, and in one fluid motion, the marshal drew and fired. His shot struck Caleb square in the shoulder, spinning him and slamming him to the dirt. Diego, you hit? Cyrus called out, seeing his foreman stagger. Just a scratch, patron, Diego replied, though blood darkened the fabric of his trousers. Then Cyrus heard it, the low rumble of hooves. He turned toward the horizon and saw the dust rising, 6 riders bearing down on them. At the head of the group was Cornelius Ashford himself, eyes blazing, mouth set in a cruel line. Ashford wasn't coming to talk. He was bringing firepower, and plenty of it. They're coming to finish it, Whitmore said grimly. He can't afford to leave witnesses. We're all targets now. Get her inside. Cyrus barked. Diego, secure those bastards. But Ezra Garrett wasn't done. As Diego limped forward to tie him, the outlaw twisted, a hidden knife flashing in the sun. He slashed at Diego's leg, forcing the foreman to stumble back. That was all Caleb needed. He scrambled again for the fallen weapon. Another gunshot echoed. This one came from above. Ashford's men had arrived. Bullets whined through the air. Splinters flew from porch posts, and Cyrus dropped to the ground behind his steps, heart pounding. From behind the barn, Maggie's voice rang out. Mr. Blackwood, there's a rifle in your front closet. I know how to shoot. Stay inside. Cyrus shouted. This ain't your fight. The hell it ain't, she yelled back. They burned down my whole life. I've got every right to fight back. She wasn't wrong. Whitmore was firing back with deadly precision, dropping one of Ashford's riders with a clean shot. Sheriff Hollister, still on the ground, grabbed a pistol and joined in. You use me, he shouted at Ashford. You lying, snake-bellied son of a... Cyrus could barely believe his eyes. The sheriff, the marshal, Maggie, even Diego, bleeding but unbowed. They were holding their ground. The air filled with smoke and gunpowder. When it cleared, 3 of Ashford's men were down, one writhing, one dead, and the third trying to crawl to his horse. Cornelius Ashford clutched a bleeding arm, struggling to control his mount. Whitmore stepped forward. Cornelius Ashford, he called out, gun raised. You're under arrest for theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. But Ashford's eyes weren't on him. They were locked on the house. I'm not going alone, he growled. If I'm going down, I'm taking that interfering old man and his little thief with me. Cyrus saw the derringer, in Ashford's left hand a heartbeat too late. The man raised it, eyes wild with rage. Time slowed. Cyrus was too far. Whitmore was reloading. Diego was down. There was no one who could stop him. Then a shot rang out. Ashford's wrist exploded in blood as the tiny pistol flew from his hand. He screamed and fell from his horse, writhing in the dirt. Cyrus looked up. There, in the second-story window of the house, stood Maggie Lane. Smoke curled from the barrel of his old Winchester. Her eyes burned like emerald fire, her voice clear and steady. Next one goes through your heart, you lying snake. My daddy didn't just teach me how to clean a rifle. And just like that, Magnolia Lane stopped being the victim and became the reckoning. He taught me to shoot straight. The words echoed like a solemn vow as Maggie lowered the smoking rifle, her green eyes burning with fire. Marshal Whitmore stepped over the twisted body of Cornelius Ashford, who was writhing in agony, clutching the shattered remains of his wrist. "Cornelius Ashford," the marshal declared, pulling a pair of iron shackles from his coat. "You're under arrest of conspiracy, fraud, theft, and attempted murder. You have the right to go to hell." Ashford spat blood and hate through clenched teeth. "You think you've won," he hissed. "I've got judges, politicians, and lawyers from here to Austin in my pocket. I'll be out by Christmas. And when I am, I'll hunt down every last one of you." Cyrus, limping from where his knee had slammed into the porch during the gunfight, stepped forward with a glare cold enough to freeze fire. "Cornelius," he said slowly, "you always did think you were the smartest man in the room. But your biggest mistake? Believing the rest of us were just as rotten as you." The marshal tightened the cuffs with a satisfying click. "Actually, Mr. Ashford, you might want to reconsider all that boasting. See, while you were out here trying to frame Mississippi Lane and murder witnesses, my colleagues down in San Antonio were busy raiding your warehouse. Found enough stolen goods to fill a freight train. And better yet," he leaned in, "your partner, Miguel Torres, kept copies of everything. Every transaction, every name, every date. He traded the whole empire away for a lighter sentence." Ashford's face drained of color, the arrogance bleeding out at him like the blood from his wrist. That can't be. Those records were locked in my private safe." "Asterisks were asterisk locked," Whitmore said, "until we cracked it. Turns out Torres made damn sure he had leverage in case you ever decided to cut him loose." Behind them, Sheriff Hollister pushed himself to his feet, his badge hanging crooked and his once pristine coat covered in dust and gilt. "Marshal," he began, voice brittle, I didn't know it had gone this far. Cornelius told me the girl had stolen the jewelry. He said there were witnesses. Witnesses you never bothered to find." Cyrus snapped. "You've been wearing that badge for 10 years, Wade, and you still don't know the difference between a rich man's word and the truth." From the porch, Maggie stepped forward, her rifle now pointed safely at the ground. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. Her eyes took in the scene. The wounded men, the dying light of the day, the federal marshal securing chains around the man who had tried to ruin her life, and the old rancher who'd risked everything to defend her. But the day had one more revelation to offer. In the distance, another dust cloud rose. Cyrus squinted into the fading sun. A single rider raced across the valley, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. The rider pulled up hard, and as he dismounted, everyone recognized the familiar face of Dr. Benjamin Harper, the town's physician. "Marshal Whitmore," the doctor shouted breathlessly, pulling a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket. "Thank God I found you in time. There's something you need to see. It changes everything." "What is it, Doc?" the marshal asked, walking forward. Dr. Harper handed him the paper, his eyes serious. "I've been treating Mrs. Ashford for her nerves, but yesterday she came to me in tears, said the guilt was eating her alive. She wrote a confession and begged me to get it to the right people before she changed her mind." Cornelius's face turned bone-white. "She's sick," he barked. "Doesn't know what she's saying. She's been taking laudanum." "Your wife is more clear-headed than you've ever been," the doctor cut in. "And what she wrote would make a priest cry." Whitmore opened the letter and began to read aloud. Each sentence hit like a hammer. Eleanor Ashford had seen her husband plant the stolen jewelry in Maggie Lane's belongings. She had seen the rage in his eyes the day Maggie rejected his unwanted advances. When she threatened to tell his wife, Cornelius had exploded in fury, fired her on the spot, and summoned the sheriff the next morning with lies dressed as truth. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. Her voice shook. He tried to force himself on me. When I pushed him away, he told me I'd regret it, and I have, every day since." The marshal's hands trembled as he folded the paper and slid it into his coat. Eleanor also told Dr. Harper where to find Cornelius's real safe, hidden behind a false wall in the cellar. Inside it, account books going back 5 years, details of theft stretching from Dallas to El Paso, Hollister sank onto Cyrus's porch steps like a man whose soul had finally buckled. My God, I nearly drove an innocent woman out of town. I nearly got her killed, and all for the word of a man who doesn't deserve the ground he stands on. Whitmore turned to him, voice not without a hint of mercy. You're going to answer for what you did, Sheriff. But the fact that you picked the right side when the bullets started flying, that might mean something when you stand before a judge. As the sun slipped below the hills, painting the valley in gold and crimson, the pieces began to fall into place. Ashford and his remaining gang were chained and loaded into a prison wagon that arrived just in time. 2 deputy marshals took statements from witnesses. The wounded were treated. The dead were covered and carried to be laid to rest. On the porch, Maggie stood beside Cyrus. She watched as the wagon pulled away, carrying the man who had nearly destroyed her. She turned to the rancher who had stood between her and ruin. Mr. Blackwood, she said softly, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't believed in me. No thanks needed, Cyrus said with a gentle smile. I just did what any decent man should do. And besides, he gave her shoulder a light pat, this old house could use a woman's touch, if you're willing to stay. Diego's wife could use the help, and I could use someone who knows the difference between silver polish and snake oil. 6 months later, Maggie Lane married Diego's eldest son, Carlos, in a spring ceremony held beneath the cottonwoods of the Blackwood Ranch. Sheriff Hollister served 30 days in jail and was stripped of his badge, but under the guidance of a new, honest sheriff, he was allowed to return as a deputy, humbled and determined to earn his redemption. As for Cornelius Ashford, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His stolen fortune was seized and returned to those he'd stolen from. His name, once spoken with power, became a cautionary tale. And Cyrus Blackwood? He lived to see true justice come to Millbrook. He lived to know that sometimes the most important stand you'll ever take is the one you take not for yourself, but for someone who no longer has the strength to stand alone. Now, if you thought this story was powerful, the next one will leave you breathless. There's a twist coming you'll never see coming. So click the next video now and prepare yourself.